April, you said that you're here because you're trying to get past the surface statements, the superficial statements the students are saying, where they are reinforcing each other and patting each other on the back and saying, "I like that too."
Right.
You want them to delve into things, use their higher order thinking skills.
Exactly. And their initial responses to the questions are great. They really dive into answering the questions. It's the responding to each other where I need help with, is how to get them to draw out what their classmates are saying, possibly reformulating different questions. It's the responding aspect of it.
That's the reason I'm participating as well. The posts are generally good. It's the responses that are weak, and the continuing engagement with the discussion rather than just answering one classmate and then that's it. And then they only do it one time, at 11:30 on Sunday when it's due at midnight. So I would like them to engage with the discussion throughout the week that it's posted.
Exactly. Okay. Particularly since it's not synchronous, then it's not really a discussion. It's more of just, answering the question to check it off the list. So that's the challenging part, because it's asynchronous.
Another point would be how the professor is involved in the discussion too, and helps keep it going so that you get that deep discussion. And I was just thinking maybe people would share ideas of how they do that in their courses. That would be helpful.
Karen pointed out that students seem to be ticking off their responsibilities in the discussion like tasks on a checklist. And when they satisfy those tasks, they're no longer participating.
Right.
And they might be procrastinating too and waiting till the last minute as opposed to conversing over the course of the week. And Tim pointed out that it's a little uncertain what the faculty's role is in all that and how the faculty can participate in a way that would get the type of discussion and response that we know how to do in a face-to-face environment. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yes.
Is anybody here for any other reasons?
I'm here pretty much for online discussion 101. This
Okay.
is my first time to use them. So
Okay.
I've been reading, but I need some real person, just to kind of hear how people do it.
Okay.
It works.
Myself, I've been doing things forever. I don't know some things, and I don't know that I don't know them. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Good. Well, hopefully we can all get something out of this. The next thing I want to ask, though, is why have discussion forums in online education anyway? Why do it? What's the point of bringing all these people together to converse in writing about your course content? What's the value of it? How would you pitch it to your students?
I'm going to jump in here real quick. So I teach sport management and recreation administration classes in our graduate program, and we've converted to all online. And I've really struggled over the last couple of years answering that question, Greg. But one thing I have started to do is change up the discussion formats during the week to provide them to use the technology that a discussion forum can do. So podcasting has been really sort of interesting, and I think students can do podcasting pretty easy. So within that discussion forum, I've been switching it up. Sometimes we'll do written stuff, but they also have to provide images or, create data charts or infographics, and they have to embed those in there. So when the students go through and read them, it's not just a bunch of garbled gook. It's also things they've gone and found and brought to the table. Essentially, I'm using a discussion board right now as a roundtable discussion. For the week that they're assigned these questions within the chapter or with our content, they're required to go out and get information and then bring it back to the table and display it. Then the next week is when they go in and respond, so it's actually a 2-week process for each discussion, although it's due within a 14-day period. And we make our things due on Wednesday nights just because of our graduate assistant schedules, or our students that are scheduled with teachers or GAs for athletics and things. But that has worked out successfully. The other thing that I've done, or that we've done, is we've changed the rubric too. So there's actually a rubric designed for the actual discussion, and it's also has a criteria that's called timeliness. So it will give you points based on when you do your discussion. Then there's also the response rubric, which is easily downloadable into Canvas. That has helped. We also, every week, pick out somebody, and we started doing this, Gray, actually, because of that last session you had about, remember that talk, the discussion we had about rewarding, sort of doing like the gamification?
Gamification, yeah.
So now what I've been doing is picking out somebody's responses that we feel, or that I feel are exemplary, and putting that in the discussion board. I asked the students if they want to be identified or not. Some of them do, some of them don't, which I think is kind of ironic, but that has helped. But using the discussions as a podcast has also been interesting because they don't have to show their face. They can do a recording. They have to be, well developed in their oration of the podcast, and they have to use outside resources. But it's helped with, just like April was talking about, the sort of mundaneness of just typing things in and then having it said, or, having it just be there. The responses have been really interesting with the podcast or the recorded, because that way they get to hear. It's a little more authentic, organic, and I think the kids on the surveys that I've used in the class to see how things are, that's like the number one thing that they point out in my surveys, is that they enjoy having the podcast or the vidcast because it's different than just writing.
So just because you brought it up, I want to talk a little bit about the gamification aspect. You can set up a system where people get recognized, and that recognition can come with points or it can just come with recognition. It doesn't have to be associated with points, but it can come with titles. It can come with badges. It can come with some other sort of symbolic gestures where you recognize people for most posts in a week, most in-depth posts in a week, best responses, most engaging. And you can come up with clever titles for each one. You don't have to leave it in these bland terms that I just described them as: master poster or response king and queen. With these titles, and they start to look for that recognition even more than looking for the points.
So I have a question. So you mentioned we can assign badges to students. Can we do that in Canvas?
Yes, it's called Badger. Badger's the app that is tied with Canvas, and you activate it in settings. What I don't remember, I've used it before, but what I don't remember, you may have to contact Kelly in order to activate it. So Kelly Kirkland in OIT is the person you would contact.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Those are all great ideas, Todd. Let's go back to that question though. Why how would you pitch it to students? Why should we have discussion forums? What's the benefit of it?
Well, learning is supposed to be interactive and engaging, and in a regular classroom setting, we talk, we break up into groups, and I think that with Canvas, the discussion boards are the way to do that. Part of it is getting them to learn from each other and reading other responses. One of the things that I've done, and part of the reason I'm here is because I want to hear what other techniques people have used, but is posing a question where they have to take different sides. So I'll give them a particular historical interpretation and break the class up into groups based on their last names and say, okay, you have to argue why this is a proper historical interpretation. On the other side, the rest of the class argues why it's not. To get them to use evidence, to get them to think in different ways, maybe to think different from how they would answer that question if they were given that opportunity. It's about getting them engaged, getting them learning from each other, and also taking ownership of the class, because one of the things I do in discussion, and I didn't do it this week, I posed the discussion questions this week, but starting next week, I'm going to have 2 or 3 discussion leaders each week. So they're going to be responsible for posting the actual questions and getting discussion going. Of course,
nice.
I'll be moderating and getting involved, but I want them to take ownership of it. So
I like that. I like that a lot.
My question, I want to go back to what he just said about the 2 or 3 discussion leaders each week.
Yeah.
Where do they post their questions? Do you open up a conference or?
What I do, Tim, is I'll have a weekly module, and so I'll create the discussion board. They'll send me their question by noon on Monday, and then I'll upload it. I'll post it.
Okay,
So
I
that'll be
gotcha.
so that'll be like the initial.
So if you give them like a particular content area or a specific realm that you want them to,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So I mean, to give you an example, next week I'm teaching a course on the 1970s. So next week the topic is going to be focused on questions about religion and self-discovery and identity in the 70s. So they have a host of readings that they'll be doing for next week. They're gonna pull their question from the themes in the readings. Before we post that question, send it to me. Let me take a look at it, make any necessary changes. But you know, it's going to be their question.
Yeah, that makes sense.